Hey, everybody, welcome to David's Life and Observation with your host, David Welch. So, it's been a few months. Gave us some time, let some things like kind of play out, let some things cool down in my life, and we moved. We moved from a larger place that we were renting from a good dear friend of mine to an apartment to save money so we can, eventually get into our own house. So, that's kind of where I'm at. Since we've left Texas, our lives have been drastically easier, I would say. I mean, not so much easy as far as like, trials and tribulations like every family has, but world of difference. I couldn't even imagine being on Fort Hood with this COVID shit going on because I could just imagine the amount of dumb shit that they make soldiers do on Fort Hood anyway, minus dragging a pandemic into it. So it's been a world of difference. And for those out there kind of naysaying, saying like, man, you didn't sue Fort Hood, you never sued Copper's Cove, things like that. And I definitely have a reason to. Copper's Cove is still withholding evidence from me. The Texas Attorney General still hasn't forced them to release documentation. And they're doing it for a reason. They're so used and practiced at withholding information from people in order to prevent lawsuits. Like, it's literally that tactic. And people are like, well, you should have just filed the lawsuit anyway. Go ahead and get your discovery. They still wouldn't have turned everything over. And that's just the way it's going to go. Like, all the guys that were there, that were part of my case, two of them have already left the department. They're no longer part of that department. They've gone on to other departments because they were under so much fucking heat already. Anyways, so the whole point of this David's life and observation is to point out a couple things. A couple things about Fort Hood, a couple of things about the Breonna Taylor case, which is still going on. As far as you have this officer now that is trying to sue the boyfriend who was defending himself and Breonna Taylor. And I like how everybody's jumping on the bandwagon of, oh, there's literally one witness that says the police knocked, and you've got about 12 others that were like, nah, no, they didn't. There's a lot of people that are under the belief that they released body camera of the incident. No, they haven't. They have not. It is in the affidavit. It is in all the documentation that the officers involved in the incident were not wearing body cameras. The body cameras that are released are the ones from the SWAT and other officers that arrived after the shooting, after the occurrence. So for people mistakenly say, oh no, they released the body camera and she was laying in the hall, like, okay, she was laying in the hall. Does that automatically assume that she heard that it was police? I'll tell you what, I could be sitting in my back room. People will be pounding on the door too, or coming through the door. And that doesn't mean I heard the word police. That doesn't mean I heard anything going on, especially with a barrage of commands and loud sounds coming from the door. Now, when it comes to that officer, like, you did wrong. Like, you should be in a federal all the officers involved in that should be in prison going away for a long time or on death row because they murdered someone. Even if it's manslaughter, even at the very least, it's manslaughter. Like, they really didn't have it's been proven time and again, they really didn't have a reason to be there. They had a warrant to search the premises. They had a warrant to have a discussion with Breonna Taylor. They didn't have a warrant. They even had a no-knock warrant. Like, if you have a no-knock warrant and you change up your story to, oh, we knocked, like, that doesn't make sense. Just doesn't. Why would you request a no-knock warrant and then fail to just go through the entrance the way you wanted to do? And here's what happened. They didn't knock. One officer ended up getting shot at, and they returned fire like crazy and killed Breonna Taylor. And Now that officer that is being, accused of blind firing or whatever, he's trying to sue. And it's like, dude, be thankful that you're not being, you're not in a situation where you're on death row for the murder of somebody from your negligence. And then for the DA's office and the prosecutors not to give the jury the proper options on what they can and cannot do, it just smells of cover up. It smacks of corruption, and that's literally that entire department, corruption. And it's police everywhere, corruption. Mesa PD in Arizona, corruption. Phoenix PD in Arizona, corruption. Any PD out here, corruption. All they know how to do is lie and bullshit in court and make things up as they go. They confront people every day where they make up laws and affect arrests, and then use secondary charges that'll stick because they know their first charge is going to be bullshit. So they'll say, "Oh, you were resisting," even though you didn't resist, or they'll say, "Failure to ID." That's another popular one, or the catch-all. "Oh, you were being disorderly." Well, that's kind of like a catch-all, very vague language to say they can stop and fucking harass the shit out of anybody. Literally, it's what it is. But yeah, the Breonna Taylor case, the fact that those officers aren't rotting away in a jail cell right now is an affront, and the fucking reason why people have a disconnect with law enforcement is literally one of the biggest reasons. That case alone is a big, huge fucking reason. Not to mention other cases that continuously come out, right? Now, here's my bit about Fort Hood. You have a soldier coming out in a recent, TikTok saying, "Hey, like, my command leadership's like talking shit about me. I went to mental health or behavior health for help, and now his chain of command is talking shit on the guy." Mind you, the upper echelon of the chain of command, like, they don't really go hard in the paint overseas like your lower level enlisted. Like, yeah, they'll go to a FOB overseas and they won't leave the fucking FOB or the command area ever. They don't go out on patrol. I mean, you might have a 2-bar go out. Maybe. Fucking maybe, but if it's a commander or anybody above that, they're a fucking pilot. And anybody else that's, a gold bar or whatever have you out there, junior grade officer, like, not likely. Not likely. If they are out there, they're fucking being chicken little out there. They're being told to shut up by top, and top's taking care of business. Or whoever the senior NCO is in your group. Now, Fort Hood is miraculously a black hole when it comes to careers. It's literally a black hole where people's careers go to die. You'll have a good career all the way up until you get to one of the commands that's on Fort Hood. And then next thing you know, within a year's time, it evaporates. It doesn't very much get improved. It literally evaporates unless you're on deployment. And even then, you have so much toxic leadership that it's painful for everybody to experience a deployment, much less deal with shitty leadership while you're out there. The NCOs out there, and I'm not saying all NCOs, we've had some, from my wife and I's experience, we dealt with some really awesome NCOs, and we dealt with some really not awesome NCOs who were like, it was mainly the E7 and above who spent quality time talking down, dressing down soldiers, telling them things like, "We're going to end your career, we're going to find ways to get you out of the military, or we're going to report you on trivialities." And then next thing you know, that same senior leadership's doing all sorts of heinous things, saying all sorts of crazy things about the lower enlisted and about their command staff, and it's supposed to be okay. Whereas if you mention anything as a lower enlisted, they will absolutely hang your career out to dry. They don't care. So it's very much cutthroat, very much, it's very much a me show. So there's a lot of narcissists who don't actually care about their soldiers. And the only reason their soldiers in some cases perform well is because they are threatened with all sorts of craziness unless they are going to perform well. And that's going to build anxiety. That's going to build distrust. So you're going overseas, you're going Afghanistan, Iraq, you're going into the shit with people you don't trust. That's scary. That fucking would stress me out. That's why you see people's pictures, guys who go into a war zone come back and they've lost 20, 30 pounds. Not just because it's hot out there, but because they're dealing with the anxiety of maybe this NCO doesn't have my back. I can't trust this dude in a firefight. I can't trust this guy or this woman to do what I need him to do when shit hits the fan. That freaked me out too. When you can't trust someone to do their job. In the Navy, my experience is a lot different. My experience is a lot of the guys, yeah, they joked around, they had fun, but they were consummate professionals when it came to their job. They knew how to do the shit and well. That's why Navy corpsmen, who are individual augmentees or, Fleet Marine Force, and they're out there with Marines or they're out there with soldiers doing the job, they don't play. They know their job. They do it very well. They save lives out there. It's why they're referred to as Doc. And it's just one of those things where, it's one of those differences between branches where in the Army, it's pretty much assumed that, if you're E5 or above, you know what you're doing. But we've seen it time and again where E5 and above are just trash. They don't know what they're doing. Or you got one sergeant or staff sergeant that's overloaded with 30, 40 responsibilities, and then the other sergeants are trash because they're not doing anything. But they're getting all the clout and shit and benefiting from the work that actual working sergeant or even corporal or specialist is doing. And we see it all the time. Now let's talk about just specifically behavior health at Fort Hood. So behavior health at Fort Hood is at Darnell Hospital, and you'll have a one licensed professional counselor, and then you'll have a non-licensed professional counselor actually who is doing their observation hours. And it's supposed to be observation hours, not like when you do a practicum, you're not taking on soldiers to treat. You are party to what's happening. But that's not exactly what's happening at Fort Hood. You have officers that are lying to law enforcement about what soldiers are saying and what they are doing, and they are part of the upper chain of command. And then what they'll do is these officers will partner with the upper chain of command from these different units and literally discuss how they're going to get that soldier out of the military and what's going to be done as far as their treatment to make it so that the unit has to effectively leave that soldier in their care until they are processed out of the Army or until they're deemed fit to go back, which isn't a lot of the time. So just Fort Hood on its own is a terrible fucking place. It's a terrible place to be stationed. Now, to be fair to the people who work on base outside of soldiers, people who work at the PXs and the gas stations and mainly their spouses and family members of soldiers, and they're doing a hell of a job. They're doing amazing things. They get the job done. Very little hassle or to do about who's nobody cares. They get the job done by and large. I'm really talking about literally the units and the battalions and the battalion leadership. Like the battalion leadership for my wife's battalion, her, let's see, battalion commander was an amazingly arrogant, ignorant dude who had zero disregard for the law, had zero disregard for how life works outside of his fiefdom, and was probably amazed at how I talked to him because I wasn't enlisted at the point where I was talking to him. For him to actively seek out ways to punish my wife because of my words was just a kind of one of those petty things where he's like, "Hey, I'm gonna tell you to your face that you know what, we're not gonna go ahead and do certain things to bust down your wife and things like that, you know." And what's crazy as fuck is that my wife's commander was a blatant liar, lied to the battalion commander, lied to the entire command staff, the sergeant major, lied to everybody about the circumstances surrounding my wife's lack of military bearing, right? So it was incredible to hear the constant. It was incredible to hear the two sides of a story from several individuals on my wife's behalf who really broke down the narrative from the commander as being false and woefully inappropriate to them, the battalion commander siding with leadership, which we knew was going to happen when my wife lost rank for literally pretty much, cussing at the situation when she was being talked to by her commander, who was literally berating her and cursing her out in front of literally the entire upper chain of command, which is exactly what happened. And the entire upper chain of command testified to that. They even said, hey, there were words exchanged. The commander was saying these words. And then next thing you know, my wife's getting busted down. Really. It's just kind of interesting to see. But yeah, just to put it at people's minds, if there are things going on in Fort Hood, believe them. If people are having mental health issues leaving the military, it's not anywhere near the reason of them being in a war zone. It's them dealing with toxic leadership for so long that they snap. And that's what happens. It's not even so much of, Sergeant so-and-so, Specialist so-and-so, losing their shit overseas, because when they're actually on deployment, that's when they're most free and most happy. It's incredible to say that, but that's when these guys are, not living in fear. It's when they come back and they start dealing with the pettiness of the chain of command that they're actually living in fear, because the upper chain of command's only crutch for exerting leadership is to threaten careers constantly and to articulate things to bolster their own image. So that's pretty much Fort Hood in a nutshell, outside of the crazy amount of theft, murder, and rape that goes on. Oh yeah, rape is a big deal on Fort Hood. Happens all the time. Where, what's really sad is you have women on Fort Hood who have to barricade with objects and chairs and heavy boxes and shit to keep men, soldiers, E4 and below, or E5 and below, from entering their sleeping area and raping them. As a husband, I heard that several times. In fact, we went on a trip to Houston for the rodeo, and we sat next to several specialists and soldiers that would repeatedly say, "Hey, my experience of Fort Hood has been terrifying. One young lady was sleeping by herself. She didn't have a roommate yet, and guy was just roaming the halls drunk. Soldier finds that her room was unlocked somehow, goes in there and he rapes her unapologetically, admits to it, and was still allowed to go on that trip. Unapologetically raped this girl, this soldier, and she's crying. She's saying, "Hey, they're going to process me out because I was raped and I no longer feel safe in the military." And I'm like, well, no shit. Like, I don't know. But that's what happens. Fort Hood is a horrible, terrifying place outside of the surface places you can go into, like the PX. Any sort of place command led is absolutely terrifying. The leadership is absolutely atrocious, and there's something that needs to be done with Fort Hood. There needs to be serious investigations, like serious investigations into conduct of all officers and personnel, not just one unit, not just specific people, but all officers and personnel that go there and live there. And, you know, just for a team of observers to observe in real time what happens, they will be amazed at the kind of shit that takes place. Amazed. In front of your face, in front of a spouse's face. They don't care. Going back to the Breonna Taylor case. The Breonna Taylor case is a tragedy. It's horrible. But for some fucking reason, you have so many people that are arguing the events of that situation for law enforcement. You're like, what? Like, what? And people automatically are casting this negative light on Breonna Taylor when there's no evidence of it. No evidence. You have law enforcement officers literally trying to bribe the ex-boyfriend to implicate her in his business. Never happened. He denied it because she wasn't involved. So, I mean, when the facts come out, people cognitive dissonance, they or duality. They won't believe anything that goes against their belief system, or that their beliefs to understand based on what their police buddy told them. And it's funny because you have a lot of people who are statists who are not Republicans or conservatives. You have a lot of conservatives that are out there like being lumped in with people who are not them. Now, conservatives do back the blue, but they're also for accountability. When accountability is blatantly not happening, conservatives will be like, wait, that's not what's taking place here. Whereas a statist, somebody who is actually liberal, like a very liberal person, this is a very liberal view, to unquestioningly and unabatedly believe everything the government tells them as fact. Those are statists. That's a very communist way of thinking. Those are very liberal thoughts. But they hide under the blanket and cloak of conservatism and republicanism because it is a very highly held belief in conservative circles that our law enforcement community has a very tough job. They do. Our law enforcement community has a job that on a normal day can go from 0 to 1,000, and not everybody's going to react the best they can in every given situation without proper training or proper schooling. It's facts. And even a 6-month academy, even if they went to academy for a year, they're still not going to be wholly ready for the experience of law enforcement. But then again, that's why they have the catch-all of qualified immunity. Well, if someone informs an officer of them breaking the law, and mind you, you as Joe Citizen get no reprieve for ignorance of the law. They will literally tell you to your face that is no excuse. I have literally seen officers use that recently in cases like open carrying in Florida while fishing. Solo yacker was able to say, hey, I didn't know there was a sign. And then they had to backtrack. They had to run back on their words later after they'd already cuffed him, they'd already humiliated him, everything like that. They had to run back on their words saying, you know what? That sign's out of date. That ordinance is out of date. It doesn't, and it's only for this specified area for the bridge, not even where you were. So instead of apologizing and instead of saying, hey, here's my card, here's all of our information, we did you a disservice, they were going to go ahead and just ignore it and be like, no, like we're just going to cuff you, embarrass you, and take away, make shit, terrible for you and threaten your livelihood and threaten your freedom. But then whenever they have a situation where they fuck up so bad that it leads to, criminal charges possibly going back their direction, they just want to say, you know what, we investigated ourselves, our hands are clean. No other organization in the world is going to investigate themselves and find themselves in any wrongdoing. That's a woefully ignorant position to have. So why is it that we, as citizens, allow our law enforcement communities to do that? No. They need accountability. They need an outside agency. And quite frankly, it should be the FBI. If the FBI has any purpose on this planet, period, it's to ensure that municipalities, that state agencies are being held to the constitutional standard for which they are supposed to represent. And they don't. So the FBI has a huge apparatus of people working that don't actually do dick. It's called the Civil Rights Department in the Federal Bureau of Investigation, where they take a lot of complaints, but they don't do dick. And that's pretty much it. Fort Hood, shitty place, terrible place. Didn't move forward with my lawsuit. I will file late. That's okay. I will wait until I get my evidence before I file, just to make sure it's more of a complete package, because it's only me filing. I'm not going to get any assistance from an attorney. But if they don't want to let me do it, then they don't let me do it. But at least it'll be filed. Now, when it comes to living on Fort Hood, like I said, the surface areas, the places where you can go and eat and stuff seem great. But it's when you get in your actual units and live there long enough to see what happens with the people, that's when it becomes terrible. And the behavioral health place at Darnell is particularly demonous. They will lie to law enforcement. They will lie to any agency in order to secure detention or to deprive somebody of their rights. They will do it. Absolutely. In regard to law enforcement. So, when it comes to law enforcement and accountability, the Breonna Taylor case is a shining example of no accountability. And then we have more and more situations every day where there's literally no accountability happening. So that divide's going to keep happening. People are still going to stay pissed off. And there's going to be no forward movement until the Civil War kicks off that people are joking about now until it happens. So when it happens, I hope you're armed. Be ready.